Hello, Blake Rudis here with F64 Academy, and today I want to show you how you can use Adobe Camera Raw creatively as a filter in Photoshop CC. This is a really cool technique. Probably haven't seen this before, so you want to check this out because we're going to take this photo and make it more dramatic in a way like this and also like this, and discuss how you can use Adobe Camera Raw to make these effects really effectively and easily. And because it's Adobe Camera Raw as a filter in Photoshop CC, you can make them actionable. So without further ado, let's go and check it out. So basically what we're going to be doing here is kind of like making a high pass sharpen effect, but in Adobe Camera Raw with the controls over tone. Now this is really powerful, and it's unlike something like curves where you really can't quite see what's happening to your image. With this, you can make predictable and really easily adjustable results. So before we begin to that, we have to talk about soft light and how soft light works on a photo. So here we have a 50% gray background, and we have a kind of dulled down RGB kind of palette here. So I'm going to make a new layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint on this with black, just pure black. I'm going to paint right over here. Okay, so that's pure black over here. Just cover this whole side with pure black and then finish that off. I'm going to press the X key, default that to white, and I'm going to paint over here with white. So you'll see what's going to happen here in a second, okay? And then right in the middle here, I'm going to go ahead and paint 50% gray. So I'm going to change this to something 50% gray. It's going to be 128 by 128 and 128. So basically 128 pixels of RGB. That'll give us 50% gray. And I'm going to paint that right here in the middle over all of that. So what you're looking at essentially is a purely painted white on the left, black on the right, and white and medium gray in the middle, almost like a Neapolitan without the strawberry. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to change this to soft light. Now what I want you to recognize here is that on the left hand side we had pure white, and on the right hand side we had pure black, and in between we had 50% gray. Now look what happens when we change that to soft light. When we change that to soft light, everything on the left gets slightly lighter, but it doesn't reach pure white. And everything on the right gets slightly darker, but doesn't reach pure black. So basically what that means is it's going to make your lights lighter, your darks darker, without letting them get to the extreme of blowout per se. And that's really important because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adjusting this image in Adobe Camera Raw like a black and white photo. So in order to do this, you have to be using Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. So that's going to be Adobe Photoshop CC 2014 and beyond. There are workarounds for people using Photoshop CS6. You could essentially just open up the document that you're going to edit, leave it like this, and then open up a copy of it into Adobe Camera Raw. And you could do it that way too, but it's not quite as easy. Really, this tutorial is geared towards individuals with Photoshop CC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the background layer. Press Command or Control J. Now before we change this to soft light, that soft light blending mode, we're going to go ahead and press Control Shift A, which is the hotkey for Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. Or if you're using a Mac, that's Command Shift A. So here's the image. What I want you to do, if you're working along with me on one of your photographs, drop the saturation all the way down to negative 100%. So now you can see areas that are 50% gray and areas that are slightly on the whiter side and slightly on the darker side. But now we can get extreme control over this. So I want you to make this look almost like a high pass adjustment would look. So how we're going to do that is we're going to drop the highlights all the way down to 0, increase the shadows all the way up, drop the whites, increase the darks. So now we have this bland, almost 50% gray looking photo, and now we can make our adjustments in between. Another tool that you can use for this to make those adjustments are your contrast and your dehaze. So let's go ahead and just open this. We've got this just like this. Let's open this up in Photoshop. So now, because that was used as a filter, that's the effect. If we go over here and go to soft light, you'll notice that our darks get much darker, our lights get much lighter, but not to the point of pure black or pure white. Now, let's go ahead and duplicate that again, Command or Control J, and right click on that and say Convert to Smart Object. So now that it's a smart object, we can go back into there and make adjustments to the settings without having to delete that and go back. This is smart editing. We'll go ahead and press Control Shift A on that again. So now we're going to do the exact same process. We're going to decrease those highlights, increase those shadows, drop our saturation all the way down to 0, decrease our whites, and increase our blacks. And here, the things that are basically going to control what gets darker and what gets lighter are going to be your contrast. That's one that's going to control that. Your clarity, that can also control that to give you some really insane detail. So we'll bring that all the way up. And also, what's lesser known is the dehaze adjustment. Dehaze can also do that. So we're going to go ahead and move that up a little bit there and then come over here, back over here. And now we can make adjustments to our contrast. So we can really drop that contrast all the way down and then come over to something like dehaze, increase that all the way up. And we'll see what happens now. We'll press OK. So you're going to see that as you do this over time, you start to understand exactly what's happening to your photograph as you do this. So you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, that's really dark in the darks. Our lights have kind of been pushed more towards this kind of milky, almost tone mapped effect. It's basically what we're doing here. This is tone mapping. We're taking the tones and we're mapping out what we want lighter and what we want darker. It's kind of like HDR using Adobe Camera Raw. However, if you double click right here, you see your blend if principles. Now we can protect all of the highlights from what's happening on this layer. So we can press Alt or Option, click right here and drop this down. And as we drop this down, you see that we no longer have that effect happening on our image. So on our highlights per se, but it's happening on our darks. So you can maintain those really nice dark colors like you would as the sun's just about to set and the sunset's just about to go along the horizon. You get the nice shadows, but you also get that nice highlight in there without this being washed out like this that doesn't show really any sign of depth. Now we've created a dramatic sign of depth, and we could go even further. You can add a mask to this, and then you can brush with black on areas that you really don't want to be affected by this at all. So maybe say we only want the rocks to be affected. Now we've got that on the rocks. On the rocks. Get it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this. I'm going to go to my history panel. I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to go ahead and double click into the smart filter where a Camera Raw filter is. So double click in there and that's going to bring us right back into Adobe Camera Raw. So now what I want you to do is reverse all the settings. So we're going to bring this all the way up. We're going to bring this all the way down. We're going to bring this all the way up. Bring this all the way down. And take our clarity, bring it all the way down and go over here to dehaze and bring that all the way down. So now we have almost like this dreamy, whimsical look where things are really white, all right? We can even control this even more with contrast or even exposure too. So we can bring that exposure up and press OK. This is going to give us that dreamy look I showed you in the beginning, because now we've gone from where we were before with that really high contrast in the lights and darks to a much higher contrast in the mid-tone areas of our lights. So as you're watching this, you're probably like, why is he using all of these black and white layers to do this? And the reason is because once you understand how to control the tone of your image, and you understand what happens with tone, and what I mean by tone is drop the color out completely so that you know that as you make these edits with these black and white principles in mind, with soft light applied, you can add increased drama and depth to your image without using curves. And the reason why I say that without using curves is because, let's say on this photograph here, we were to go ahead and open up a curves adjustment layer. You really can't see what is being affected by the darks and what's being affected by the lights. We know that when we do this type of S-curve, we make the darks darker and the lights lighter. But where exactly are the darks getting darker and where exactly are the lights getting lighter? We don't really know. Obviously, we can change this to luminosity to make that look a little bit better. But here, we've actually controlled this. And now we can jump back into this and say, okay, maybe those rocks aren't quite as sharp as I want them or quite as dramatic as I want them to be. So let me increase that contrast. So if I increase the contrast here, because our highlights are already protected with the blend if, we are now going to have more dramatic rock shadows than we did before, because we're controlling how much dark is being applied there, but we're saying, okay, pump the brakes. All right, we got soft light applied here, so we don't want our darks to get too dark, we don't want our lights to get too light, but we've got exactly what we want because we're using those blend if principles to make sure our highlights don't get affected too much. While I know this tutorial is not for the faint of heart, take this into practice. Practice with these black and white principles with soft light applied. You're going to be really surprised on what you see. Now, you may already be one of those people who dodges and burns right now. And when you dodge and burn, you're probably one of those individuals that uses a black pen and a white pen to dodge and burn. This is essentially the same thing, only more, let's say, psycho-targeted to exactly what you want to be darker and what you want to be lighter without just spraying a mess of white all over the place or a mess of black all over the place. And like I said before, these are actionable because this is Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. However, I was really thinking about making the actions for you and giving them to you, and it's not because I'm lazy. It's just because I want you to get in here and get to work and learn the tone. If I made an action for you, you would learn nothing, but I'll use my actions. So what we learned today, we learned about soft light blending mode. So anything that's 50% gray does not get any adjustment. Anything that's white gets slightly lighter, but not pure white. Anything that's dark black gets a little bit darker, but not pure black. Okay, and then when you apply those principles with this Adobe Camera Raw as a filter, you can do some pretty phenomenal things. Now, do you only need to use Adobe Camera Raw as a filter for this? No, there's other means that you could use for this, but it would give you a little bit less control because, as we know, the adjustment panel, the basic adjustment panel that is in Adobe Camera Raw is extremely powerful for editing photographs. So keep all this stuff in mind. Again, my name is Blake Rudis with F64 Academy. And if you like it, please comment, share it, send it to a friend. And I can't suggest this anymore, but to subscribe, okay? Because if you subscribe, you get an inbox message when a new tutorial comes out. Typically every single Friday, I put one of those out, unless I'm under the weather or one of my children has duct tape me to the wall. Thanks again for taking a look at this, and please let me know if you have a similar process that you use to get something like this with added depth but a lot of control. Take care.